Today, we are talking about the best jobs to start into Final Fantasy XIV, but not only to start into the game, level up, but also how you're delving into or starting into endgame content and which job is the best choice for doing so and for giving you a good gripe and good example for certain roles like the healer role, the tanking role, or DPS role, and also giving you a good basic foundation to learn the game and know what you have to do in that game. And I would say there are a couple of differences here that we want to talk about today and want to highlight some of these jobs for you, like I basically did in my full edited videos, and there will be one of these videos coming out after I leveled all my jobs to 90 in Endwalker, so stick around for that one as well. But yeah, today we want to have a very quick summary of what I think, my initial impressions, what might be the best job for getting started into Final Fantasy XIV. The most obvious choice, in my opinion, and still one of the best choices you can have, even for endgame, is a warrior, which of course starts as a marauder. But yeah, we have the warrior here, which you will become on level 30. And warrior is really, really good. It's a real starter class, so you can directly start the marauder from the base screen. So yeah, note that all these are jobs, so that means every job is unlocked on reaching level 30 on a certain class. Some of these are the starting as the job directly, like the Red Mage, for example, the Reaper, for example. These are directly starting as their job. And we have the Warrior, for example, that is sitting on the opposite side, starting as a Marauder, becoming a Warrior on level 30. And yeah, Warrior offers basically everything you need as a tank. You have very, very good self-sustain, very impressive self-healing. The rotation is not that difficult to get started into it, and you have a very clear difference between burst phase and not burst phase, where you can calm down, you can focus on doing some defensive stuff in between. And yeah, you're really a one-man army, not only in dungeons. I would say this whole one-man army aspect ends in big endgame raids, but it's a really solid choice to start with. And yeah, you can always choose Gunbreaker later on or Dark Knight later on, which leads us to, I think, the Dark Knight not being super beginner friendly. I would cautionally place it here on B, but C is definitely also possible, because there are two main disadvantages the Dark Knight has. Dark Knight is first very busy. Dark Knight plays very busy. You have a lot of OGCDs, you have a lot of stuff to click, you have very difficult mechanics like TBN, the Blackest Night, which is a shield that tries to mitigate damage, and you only get a good benefit, an offensive benefit, when this is successfully done. Like, it has to be broken by enemy attacks, and then the shield grants you advantages in offensive ways. So that's a kind of difficult mechanic. You also have lots of OGCDs that you need to weave in your rotation, which is demanding for newcomers and might be very stressful if you don't have proper key bindings and setup. So that's disadvantage number one. And disadvantage number two is that once you unlock the Dark Knight upon reaching Heavensward level, which right now is part of the base game and also part of the free trial, so that's definitely a good thing. But on the other hand, you're falling down with 20 levels. So once you unlock the Dark Knight upon reaching Ishgard for the first time, you're starting the Dark Knight, and Dark Knight is getting reduced, or your Dark Knight level is getting reduced by 20 levels, and you start on level 30 as Dark Knight. That's a big bummer for me. I know it's old design, basically started in Heavensward. They wanted to provide more time for you to enjoy the job, to get used to the job, which is fine. I think it's fine, but it's not kinda on par with what they should fix or what they should update into the new system, where basically jobs are getting unlocked at the point when you start them with. For example, you reach level 50, you can directly start into a samurai or into a red mage, for example. You don't have any fallback. You can directly smoothly transition over to these jobs with no problem. A Greed Warrior is just super comfy to get used to. Also, before level 70, the lack of a TBN is super annoying in my opinion, since you don't get on-demand defensive tool before it compared to other tanks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I said, Dark Knight is really, really not a bad choice. I think none of these jobs is a bad choice for beginners, because getting used to them is kind of a demanding task on each job here, but because, yeah, how complex the Final Fantasy XIV battle system is. But I think Dark Knight is definitely on the edge of being difficult. But yeah, next up we got the Paladin. I would say the Paladin, in my opinion, is actually on the same spot as the Warrior, but it might be a slightly more difficult job or more advanced job because of how the rotation can be difficult later on. On the other hand, you have very, very good self-sustain. You have a very logical starting point with the Gladiator that is introducing you nicely into the Paladin later on. But yeah, I think Clemency is one of the aspects that might stand out to make it difficult, because you really have to optimize using it, or actually not using it. Keeping away from your Clemency to avoid losing damage and all that stuff. It's a hard decision. I would say Paladin is not worse than a Warrior, but has a very, very mild disadvantage compared to it when it comes to, yeah, the fact that you have to actively heal to get to the level of a Warrior healing, but then you lose damage. And yeah, you really have to know when the sacrifice is worth doing. And that's something a newcomer should not or will not have the knowledge about. Yeah, when staying at the tanks, I think Gunbreaker is an easy choice. Gunbreaker is definitely easy to start with, but super busy. Maybe yeah. When I think it's not balancing. So don't get me wrong. You can play all of these jobs. They're all very, very strong, but getting used to them and getting started on these jobs is a different topic here. So I think Gunbreaker is a B tier, slightly less good than Warrior or Paladin, because first, it's a super busy class. You have so much OGCDs that have to be precisely used in a certain way with your continuation ability and your mechanic. Then you also have lots of defensive tools that need to be weaved inside of that window, where basically you're spamming buttons all over, and kind of on the same level as the Dark Knight in certain parts of your rotation. Then you also have the disadvantage that you just have to reach level 70 or 60 to start the Gunbreaker. You have a better transition than with the Dark Knight. That's why it's above the Dark Knight, because you don't have the drop down levels. You don't fall down to start with the Gunbreaker. But I think overall it's a bit more beginner friendly with how the defensive cooldowns work. You don't have the big disadvantage with T-Ben. Yeah, like Otis mentioned, before level 70, it's kind of a mess playing a Dark Knight. And it's not fun sometimes. It's really sometimes super boring, because you don't have active defensive tools. I wouldn't put any melee tanks below B tier in my opinion, but Dark Knight would be on the lower end. Until TBN, also job quests kind of suck as a Paladin main. Yeah, job quest is kind of a bit annoying on Paladin. Also fun, but it can be very, very annoying sometimes. When it comes about, or when we are talking about the job quest, Dark Knight is S tier by far. I love the Dark Knight job quest. Yeah, Gunbreaker is also not bad, but Dark Knight is definitely the best there. All right, so I think next up we should just randomly put these jobs in here. Summoner would have been here somewhere before Endwalker, but right now Summoner is a really, really powerful job. So you start as a Conjurer is White Mage, as an Arcanist, right? Yeah, Thaumaturge is Black Mage, Arcanist is Summoner. As an Arcanist, but you can always switch. Whenever you reach level 30, you can switch to the Summoner, or you can choose a Scholar, which is definitely a good beginner thing. You can, every time you want to make the choice of switching to a healer or a DPS, you can do that freely, because you're leveling up both of them. You're leveling up both of them at the same time by leveling each of them. Every time you level the Scholar, the Summoner levels with it. Every time you level the Summoner, the Scholar levels with it. So that's definitely a good thing. And yeah, I think an advantage no other job has. The only thing that is kind of a bit more difficult than the natural getting started into a job is, in my opinion, that you have a pet. Even though it's significantly reduced, and that your end game rotation is, I think, the most straightforward that you can find in Final Fantasy XIV right now. But getting started as a summoner at the first levels in particular might be a bit, yeah, not bad, because the rotation is also very, very, very simple on low levels. It could be boring a bit. So I would say we're not talking about best starting classes, but also a bit fun. It has to be a bit more funny to level up. So I think that's what keeps the summoner a bit back from the S tier spot, but it's still a very, very solid choice. It's definitely very boring at the starting levels. Okay, let's just randomly put something here. Okay, Dancer. Dancer, I would say, is also on the same level as the Summoner. And right now, it's a bit more complicated. Has become more complicated since the changes in Endwalker, where Dancer had the complexity level had been increased a bit, and Summoner's complexity level had been reduced a bit, significantly actually. But yeah, that's the way it goes. But on the other hand, you are starting on level 60 as a Dancer, so you have to level up another job to get there, which might actually be a trait to put it down a line here. Yeah, I think that's fine, because this is not a traditional starting class. You don't have a class that transforms into a Dancer on 30, but you have to start another job, get it to level 60, and then you can go over to a Dancer, which is indeed a very easy job. That's hard to tell. Maybe we will change something later. It's very easy to get used to. The rotation is kind of simple. You can learn it very quickly. It's kind of fun to play, but I think it has the same potential to be boring in the very first levels. I remember that when I played the Dancer for the first time, I was like, why? Why should I play a Dancer when there's a Bard and Machinist that are way more fun to play? But yeah, later on it gets much better. Oh, man. I don't know about this one. I think D tier is a bit too much, right? It's not that difficult. It is. It actually is. It actually is. I think it's the most difficult job you can play in Final Fantasy XIV, and that automatically makes it the worst beginner job. But yeah, it's also not fun early on. It changes the rotation from what you're starting with into what you're doing on an endgame level. So it's a mixed bag, but it's a bad mixed bag. Yeah, it's changing its place at every 10 levels. Exactly. That's my biggest gripe here as well. So yeah, if any job would be placed onto D tier, I think we should start with the Black Mage. Okay, Bard, on the other hand, is a very, very lovely starting class. And I would say it might also be the A tier. So these are my top recommendations, S and A tier, because Bard basically introduces you very, very fluently into damaging, DPS roles in general, and you don't have any downsides because you have ranged attacks. That means you don't have to get into melee range, which is more dangerous most of the times than the far away range. You don't have to worry about positionings, timings, and communication, or movement and positioning communication with your team. So yeah, you can basically freely move. You don't have cast times that Black Mage have, Red Mage have, and partially Summoner has. So yeah, you are a jack of all trades. The rotation is kind of busy, like I just tested out in Aglaya. You always have to keep your eyes tracked onto your rotation, onto your procs, onto what's happening, onto your dots running. But yeah, after that is secured, the job is easy to be learned to a certain point, to a base level, and very, very solid option to start with. That's definitely a good starting job. It might be S tier as well, but I think A tier, when Summoner is A tier, yeah, should not be placed above or below the Summoner in this situation. Next up, I think Red Mage, even though it's not a starter job, you can't start as a Red Mage, you have to start another job, then transition over to a Red Mage on level 50, but 50 is also a very early point of the game where, you still have a lot of MSQ to progress through and many dungeons to play in your future progress. So that's actually a very, very solid point to swap the job and try out another job. And you can do that as Red Mage. Red Mage is introducing you very nicely. And as soon as you get the idea that casting a 5-second cast mid-fight is wrong, and you actually learned how that dual cast mechanic worked, you're good. And basically manage your mana, the white and black mana, start you into your melee combo whenever it reaches 50 on both sides, and yeah, that's it. That's basically the job. You don't have to learn anything more in later levels. There are some details, of course. You have cooldowns that work into this, but that's the base thing. Use your dual cast mechanic to cast out the big spells with dual cast procced, and use the short casts to get the dual cast effect procced. So that's basically it. And it's very straightforward, but also very fun. I think even on level 50, when the rotation is kind of simple, Red Mage is so fun. I love it. I love it. Red Mage is easy, but also rewarding and so fun to play. Okay, next up, let's throw in a healer. Definitely, White Mage is the easiest healer you can play. It has some flaws on endgame compared to the capabilities of the other healers, but it's so straightforward. If you want to be a healer, White Mage is your job. White Mage is just your job. Get started as a White Mage. That's my recommendation. It's very straightforward. Healing is not being developed or being produced through certain mechanics or very difficult mechanics and systems, but basically you click a button that heals, and it heals. You have the Lily system that automatically grants you procs that you get free heals on top of that, which of course are not balanced maybe compared to the competition quite nicely, but right now I think it's fine. It's nothing you should be too worried about. Red Mage has almost its full core mechanics at level 20. Yeah, like I said, the dual cast is very early. The system of having a melee rotation that uses your MP, your mana, is very, very early. Like, I think level 10? I think on level 10 you have the first melee swing. I don't know. I can't remember right now, but it's very, very early. And yeah, the same goes for White Mage. It's introduced very nicely. You have a very good progression curve. You level up and you learn all the stuff that you need to learn piece by piece and not being overwhelmed by certain stuff. And it's a base class. You can start as a Conjurer that will transform into a White Mage on level 30 and so on. It's very, very straightforward starter job, in my opinion. Okay, so next up, let's throw in another healer, which is a good, not counter argument, but a good opposite to the White Mage, and that's the Scholar. Scholar had been the most difficult, or one of the most difficult jobs in Shadowbringers and before. Yeah, maybe in Shadowbringers. Let's keep it at Shadowbringers level. But they have improved many quality of life stuff. Oh, the Lich King is there. Yeah, Lich King is still good. You can't argue against the Lich King. But yeah, D tier. No, D tier. Do you think a Scholar is more difficult than the Astrologian? I would say this. I think Scholar is still easier to play than an Astrologian. In my opinion. I can't actually see these backgrounds, sorry. Others repping the Dark Knight. Yeah, I would say that's the case, because you have Fairy Management. Fairy Management, you have your OGCDs that kind of sacrifice your resources. You always have the energy drain possibility that you need to sacrifice for pushing out mitigation, pushing out heal, and that comes at a cost. Everything comes at a cost as the Scholar, compared to White Mage in particular. But when you manage to do that, it's getting super efficient and super strong job. But yeah, to do that, it takes a while to learn this job. The only thing, yeah, you can also argue with the summoner aspect that it's getting a bit more beginner friendly, because you also level up the summoner and can always switch to another DPS job whenever you like, which gives it kind of the edge over some other healers here. Hard to tell, really hard to tell. I think there's a baseline of difficulty on the healing aspect, which is the astrologian. You still have card management. It's improved significantly. I think when we would talk about the astrologian in Shadowbringers or before that, we would even place it below the black mage on beginner friendliness, because it's just a messy job sometimes. It's working out as intended, and it's working out greatly, but you have a lot of practice and a lot of work to put into this job to get started. That's the only thing I can tell you. You can disagree, guys. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe this astrology... I haven't played it in Endwalker, but I think from the changes that I read through and that I tried to make sense of, it's still a difficult job, especially with macrocosmos being a thing. Yeah. You would love to move... you would move them up both a tier. Yeah, we can argue about that when we're talking about the Sage. I don't know about the Sage. Sage is the problem child for me because I haven't played it at all. And I think it could be very difficult to play. But yeah, that's the reason. Yeah, Dancer is basically lower than a Bard, Red Mage, and Summoner because it's not a base job and is unlocked later than the Red Mage. And also has a kind of more complex rotation than Machinist, in my opinion, right now. It's kind of straightforward still. It's very, very straightforward job choice. If you would have the Dancer as a base class, it would be here. But yeah, because it's starting at 60, I would say it's B tier. Yeah, Dragoon. Being a base class with the Lancer, I can't grant it a good higher spot for beginners because it has so many OGCDs and so much failure potential. I would say it kind of matches very nicely with the Dark Knight here. But it could also be on this spot. You can place it wherever you want. But I think... If we compare that to a Dancer, I think Dragoon is a much more difficult choice. I think that's a fine thing. And yeah, when we're talking about the Dragoon with so many OGCDs, positioners going wild, very static rotation that you need to track, and that you really have to be precise about, especially when you want to do the double dragon, a double life rotation, for example. There are some very keen optimizations that need to be done properly from the start. And that's not just skill ceiling, it's really the skill floor on the Dragoon is kinda high. So I would say even that as it's a starter class as the Lance and you're getting introduced into these mechanics quite nicely, it's still a very difficult job, in my opinion. You can't really start as Dancer, exactly. That's the only thing why it's not A. Reaper, kind of the same. It's even later in the game because it's level 70, right? You start the Reaper at 70, which is just 20 levels before endgame. So that automatically makes the Reaper a kind of bad choice for beginners. But on the other hand, Reaper is really, really good if you made it to that point. And if you want to start into the melee roster, coming from a ranged roster, from the caster roster, tank, healer roster, and you just want to get into these positional system. Like, I think Reaper is very, very straightforward because basically all the attacks that you have access to, you can wait with them. You don't have to force them into your rotation at a certain point. If there's any bad situation where you just can't fit any proper attack, you just can wait with the Reaper like no other job can. So I would say Reaper is a very, very good choice for starters. The only thing that keeps it back from A tier is the fact that it starts at level 70. That's the only thing there. So there's a reason why Dragoon can't do mechanic. Their kit is hard. Yeah, exactly. Dragoon is really, really difficult. Even though it's a starter class, it's, I think, one of the most difficult starter classes that you can find here. When we're not talking about the Ninja, which can be considered a starter class because you can unlock it at level 10. Then you swap over to a Ninja coming from a Rogue at level 10 to a Ninja at 30. Kind of makes it a starter class in my opinion as well. But it's just not the classical starter class that you start from the base screen. So I would say it's a starter class still. And one of the most difficult starter classes here. And I wouldn't put it here because it's not more difficult than a Dragoon, in my opinion. it it's hard to tell which is more fun, because I know that many people love the Dragoon, but also many people love the Ninja. But due to the fact that it's not so much more difficult than the Dragoon, in my opinion, because you have so many abilities like the ranged Raiton stuff and all the flexibility in your rotation, not much positional requirements because you only have your armor guard that is diversing your rear combo to the side combo. It's not that much, so you have to be more precise with the Dragoon with your positionals than on the Ninja. So the opener is busy as hell. It's the most busy openers that you can face or that you can do because of clicking quickly, very quickly, but then having to be very precise with your ninjutsu management. That's, I think, the most difficult thing for beginners to start with, but it's not on the same level as a Black Mage, in my opinion. It's still a bit easier to get started as a ninja as you would start into endgame content as a Black Mage. Easy to learn for sure. Main issue with Reaper is the low levels are super boring since they don't get stuff until very late. Yeah, I don't know why they design it in that way. I would love to have the base kit introduced more early, like on the Red Mage and Samurai, for example. Or yeah, basically, I think the Red Mage is the best example for this. Where the base kit you start or you receive when you start the job is very, very fleshed out already. That's definitely a good thing. Okay, so the list is for the best jobs to start with into Final Fantasy XIV. Not only for leveling up or for getting started into the game itself, but also starting into endgame content, feeling well about endgame content, doing your rotation comfortably, and trying to dodge stuff comfortably without much issues and struggle. So this is basically the best beginner tier list here. Machinist, in my opinion, is definitely a very, very straightforward job, but it has one significant downside that it shares with the Dark Knight. Like I said, you have the you start at level 50, but then get downvoted or down leveled to level 30 again, and especially as machinist, it's very hard to get back these 20 levels because party finder, duty finder is often very narrow when it comes to queuing as a DPS job. Tanks and healers will have much more frequent queue times, but yeah, if you stick to fates or leave quests or whatever, I think you can catch up very quickly to level 50 again. That's the reason why it's B tier, because when you reach higher levels, this is one of the easiest jobs to perform in endgame. I think Summoner is my top choice for easy rotations in endgame, but Machinist is definitely my second best choice for that. It's so straightforward, it's so easy, and even if you don't perform the correct proper rotation precisely, the base idea of doing big stuff when cooldowns are active and sticking to your big stuff, then waiting for it again, that's the main thing that you have to look for, and that's it. Once you know that, you use your battery gauge from time to time to summon your queen. You do the white fire phase properly with hypercharge. I think that's the only thing where difficulty is being introduced to the machinist, the hypercharge phase. But yeah, it's also decent low level experience. It's kind of nice to play a machinist on low levels. I think it fits quite nicely here because it's still in the big disadvantage to get de-leveled or down-leveled when you start it. That's also working for the Astrologian. So yeah, I think the Astrologian on D tier is kind of a good choice in my opinion. Yeah, Monk is a starter class. You start as a pugilist or pugilist, however you pronounce that properly. You turn into a monk, and I think I haven't played it in Endwalker, but so far from the changes that I have witnessed, it's much more fluent now. So I think I would put it here because it's still a melee job. Melee jobs are generally a bit tougher than other jobs because you have positionals that you need to take care of to optimize for your damage. So basically, melee jobs are a bit more difficult than other jobs here. Except, yeah, tanks or healers have these aspects as well. So maybe we should not track this too much. But compared to that, there are DPS jobs like the Summoner, Red Mage, or Bard, or Machinist that don't have these positionals as a requirement. It's definitely something worth considering because tanking is basically the same on all jobs. They have to live with the same problems, the same issues, and the same responsibility. But here you can just freely choose a dancer or summoner, and yeah, you don't have to live with the positional thing. And on the monk, it's being improved. I can't give you the whole picture because I haven't played it in Endwalker, but as far as I know, and I've seen the monk and talked to my friends that play a monk, it's still not the easiest job. It's I would say B tier is fine. Which, of course, leads us to the samurai. That is the only job I would consider to be on the same level as a red mage, summoner, and bard from being easy. Because you start at level 50. That's one downside. Because, yeah, you have to start as other jobs, like I said. That same goes for the red mage. But on the other hand, it's the easiest melee job right now. At least when they have removed chitin. And as long as it's still removed, this job is so easy to perform. One of the easiest jobs in its rotation, and still, I would say it's kind of very, very satisfying to play a samurai. Even though I know that many people dislike the chitin change. I do dislike it as well. But I think it's still a fine job so far. Spell it backwards, can't go wrong with that. Yeah. I gave up monk after looking at the second resource. I was like, how can I optimize this shit in Raid? Yeah, okay. I think we're not talking about optimization, but basically this tier list is about the skill floor. So, yeah, it looks stylish as well. Yeah, stylish is a bad argument because Reaper is stylish as hell. I think Reaper outmatches many of the jobs when it comes to style, and Dark Knight does as well. So that's a difficult topic. Okay, guys. Last but not least, the Sage. That's definitely something where I need your help. I haven't played the Sage yet, but as far as I'm aware, the Sage is very difficult to play. I don't know if it's more difficult than Astrologian, but the base skill floor of a Sage might be very, very high. Even though I have not seen sages struggle too much in dungeons. That's kind of weird, but I don't know. You meant the samurai. Yeah, I was talking about the samurai as well. Double weaving at monk is pretty annoying. Stylish is a bad argument for someone wearing a gray hat. Yeah, that was alright. You're right. You're right. I never claimed to be stylish, so that's definitely something to mention. It would be fun to see a tier list like this for controller gameplay. Maybe, but I'm definitely not the right person for that because I don't play on controller. I can't tell you which is very hard to play on controller. I can just make guesses according to how many job spells or icons and buttons you have to press for certain jobs. So that's the only assumption I can do here. Sage isn't hard at all in my opinion, but it isn't obvious how to play at first glance, especially since you start with so many spells. Honestly, I'd put Sage in C as it's a little easier after you know your skills. Okay, yeah, I think that's a good compromise because, yeah, Scholar is still hard. It's also barrier healer. Sage has still the very bad disadvantage to start at level 70, but doesn't have the bad disadvantage of the Astrologian that you get down leveled by 20 levels. So, yeah, I would say C tier is fine. I would stick with that as well. Reject controller, become what you must. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of AoE heals and shots, hots. Honestly, I put Sage, yeah. I would say Sage is a very good spot in C. Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing. Now you might think why we don't have any melee job in S tier. Which job should I start with? Think about A and S tier being super close, like really, really close. And if you really need one peace of mind and one choice that you can choose over the others, then it's the Summoner. Because Summoner is really easy on endgame, on its rotation. It has every advantage it can offer, possibly offer, because you have... It's a natural starter class as the Arcanist that can choose either a healer or DPS job on 30 and levels up both of them at the same time. Yeah, that's nothing where this can be beaten. Summoner is really straightforward right now. Yeah, maybe let's keep it that. Summoner is the easiest job to perform in endgame rotation and has some very, very good advantages when leveling up. yeah, that's basically my tier list. But of course, stick around for the video if you're really interested in that in-detail opinion, and when I actually make more considerable thoughts about this and write them down in a script than just rambling about these very spontaneously.